Welcome to the Europe Conversation. My guest today is Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of the IMF. Madam Georgieva, thank you very much for joining us exclusively on Euronews from a very special location, because today we are in Bulgaria, your home country. So it makes it special in a way.
Very special. Thank you for having me from here.
I wanted to start with the man some say is now the voice of reason in Europe, and that could be Mario Draghi. He said this is now an existential moment for this continent. When you look at Europe, and now we are in Europe, is that something that you go, he's right, it's existential?
He's right. In a rapidly changing world, moving slowly means falling behind. And Europe has been moving slowly on completing the single market. When we look at the European project, it is fantastic. The best invention of the 20th century was the convergence engine of Europe. But we are now seeing this engine slowing down. When we read the Draghi report, it is very clear what needs to be done. At the front, we actually look at the priorities, and we came up with 4 points for Europe to regain competitiveness. And they are: 1, create a 28 regime for firms. Why? Because companies should be able to register in multiple countries under the same rules. 2, complete the banking union, the capital markets union. Why? Because if we don't, our savings, European savings, will be working somewhere else. Over 300 billion euros are working not in Europe. 3, get the labor qualifications to move with people. Now, labor can move, but qualifications have to be regained time and again. And that is, of course, a problem for using our labor effectively. And 4, integrate the energy system of Europe. So, of course, Mario Draghi gave a very comprehensive set of recommendations. We heard then many lofty words, oh, so important, oh, we have to do it. But we are more on the talking about doing and less on doing itself. So speed up Europe.
And of course, that's a great point, because it's been a year now. And the premise of this report was either radical change in Europe or a form of slow agony. Which one is it going to be?
I am an optimist about Europe, because I have seen Europe time and again when it is really tough making the right choice. Very often it takes some time, but then the moment comes, like during Eurozone crisis, when decisive action saved Europe. And actually the very same Mario Draghi at that time said, whatever it takes. And we are in a similar moment now. Why? Because when we look at the productivity of the United States and productivity in Europe, Europe lags behind. When we look at growth in Europe, 1.2%. So we have all this wealth, and this is all we can produce, 1.2% growth. When we look at the dynamic firms in the United States, there are firms that grow very rapidly. In Europe, we do not have that phenomenon of rapidly growing high-tech firms. Can Europe catch up? Of course. But for that, we need to make the single market our #1 priority. And actually, I have been recommending to have a single market czar, somebody who is given the authority on all the aspects of the single market to call the shots.
And that's a great point, because the problem is at this point is that the European leadership is just too weak. Who can be the whatever it takes person? Who's the man, the woman?
You know, I think
is there anyone?
So let me say that I have seen very strong leaders on the economic front in Europe. And I think if Europe is willing to delegate authority, Europe will have enough skills and capabilities to do it. I just want to remind you, when the UK decided to leave the European Union, at that time, what did Europe do? Well, delegated authority to negotiate on behalf of all 27 countries to Michel Barnier, to one person. And this one person had access to heads of states, had access to the resources of the Commission, led the negotiations, and the benefits were shared by all member states. So I'm confident that if there is a will, there would be a way. Right now, when you look at all these things I'm talking about, they are in the hands of different council formations.
Too many cooks.
And different commissioners running. I used to be a commissioner. I know that unless you're given full authority, it's very hard to break through. So Europe has to say, we want the best for our future. And you cannot get it without completing the single market. Just not possible.
And this is a fascinating idea, what you mentioned. So are you suggesting, just so that I can understand correctly what you're saying, does it mean that in order to implement this report, you need a single person with the gravitas and the authority to carry it out throughout and have the responsibility? And I'm sure you have thoughts of who you would like that person to be.
I would let this to the European leadership to decide. I think the issue is agreeing that there has to be delegation of authority, and this delegation of authority has to be across the main areas of completing the single market. Right now, different...
it's too complex.
It's so complex, and it's just not moving fast enough. I know it is moving. I want to say to the Europeans who are working on it, bravo, keep doing it. Not moving fast enough.
One of the big stories this year is, well, the tariffs regime. And when it comes to Europe, they tripled tariffs on the European Union. It's a 15% rate. When you look at that, have you assessed the impact? And some say that could signal the start of the century of humiliation for Europe. Is that too much? Are we reading too much into that 15%?
I think Europe is going to cut through that. So let's see what happened. There was an announcement of tariffs. Trade uncertainty shot through the roof, and there was panic that the world is going to slip into recession. By the way, the IMF did not subscribe to the recession option. In reality, the world has proven to be more resilient. And you look at Europe, what are the sources of this resilience? Strong institutions, good policies, responsible governance, and private sector that adapts to changes faster than the public sector does. But also, when the tariffs hit, what was announced in April, 23% tariffs across the globe on average, and what we have today, it is around 17%. When you check how much is actually collected, with all the exceptions and this and that, between 9 and 10%. In other words, the hit is not as strong. Most importantly, and I love Europe for that, majority of countries decided not to retaliate. No tit for tat. I know that some of the European people are saying, oh, we should have gone...
Europe was weak.
It was weak. But what happens if you hit back and then everybody starts hitting? We get on this down spiral. In fact, today, because of that behavior saying, look, you, the United States, you decided to go this way, we don't subscribe. You present, say, 14% of trade, the rest, 86%, 87%, we choose to trade by the rules we have established. And that is what saved the world economy, the fact that there is no slippage into everybody hitting everybody else. It's not over. In other words, that may change. And I would really urge countries, please don't go for a trade war. Don't do it.
So you say Europe made the responsible choice by taking on this 15, which may be less effectively and when it's implemented. But some believe the damage and the cost was political. And that's why the EU should have retaliated. It should have showed strength.
Well,
it's the biggest trading bloc in the world.
Europe can show strength by working actively with those who want to trade on the basis of rules. And I would encourage Europe to show leadership in that regard. Because when you look at the world today, multipolar, you see regions that are now building stronger intra-region trade like ASEAN or the Gulf countries. Europe has already started reaching out more actively to build agreements with different, let's call them new blocs. And that is where Europe should bring its soft power in action. Move the world away from a trade war.
So you would like to see the Mercosur approved? Would you like to see a European WTO? That idea was floated?
Totally. I want to see the Europeans saying, well, trade war, thank you, but no, thank you. We are going to work with the rest of the world. Now, I'm actually optimist about where we are going to land, because if you look at the history of humanity, it's a history of trade. Trade is like water. You put an obstacle, it goes around it. But it can go around it with more efficiency or less efficiency. Europe has to make the new world, the multipolar world of multiple interests, to work more efficiently. And actually, there is an appetite around the world. I hear it from our members for Europe to take this leadership role.
Can that happen? And of course, we're in Bulgaria today. Ukraine is very close, and you can really see it also in the zeitgeist. Can you do all of that while also there's a war going on in the continent? I wonder, just from your experience, of course, you were, if I remember correctly, if I've done the maths correctly, you were just 35 when the Iron Curtain fell. At that time, it seemed this is a new world of possibilities, and now there's a war in continental Europe. Do you sometimes go, how did we end up here?
I'll tell you, I never thought I would see a military power in Europe invading another country, but it happened. What we see in the world today is more unpredictability, the unthinkable taking place. And we have to recognize this is the world we live in and we will be living in. What does it mean? It means two things. Actually, it demands more cooperation, not less. When you have uncertainty, to see a path, you have to work more with others, with like-minded. And second, it means more agility and adaptability. For Europe, this means also looking at the decision-making process in Europe. Is it good? Is it adaptable enough for a fast-changing world? And going back to my experience after the end of the Cold War, there was a period of euphoria when we embraced freedom, and it was fantastic, and then hard reality hit. It is difficult to transform an economy. Now we have a world that is being hit by multiple forces of transformation: geopolitical, trade, technology, demography, climate. Just imagine how much more difficult it is to adapt and transform in this world. And actually, I believe that new member states, they should raise their voice even more on the importance of agility and adaptability in a transforming world, because they know from experience what it is.
And you mentioned all of the issues, which are many. Obviously, now there's a war, there's a question of demographics, there's a question of climate, now there's a question of rearming. Obviously, everyone has agreed to pay this 5% to NATO. But what I don't see, I see the many challenges, but I don't see the fiscal space, and I don't see political consensus around a budget.
True.
How do you go around this?
What do you do when you don't have fiscal space? You create it. How do you create it? One, make Europe more competitive, make it more productive, raise the growth level to a point when we actually can create more space. Two, reform. I mean, how is it that reforms we all know have to take place, like pension reform, are so tough to do? I think we have
the French just put it on hold. There's a lot of fatigue.
We have to engage people and just be honest with people, saying, look, you, and more importantly, your children, your grandchildren, if you want them to live with a standard of living that is at par with your aspirations, Europe has to be more productive. Europeans who live longer have to work longer. when I was, you talk about the pre-Cold War, end of Cold War time. I was a professor in Bulgaria in these days. I was confident that I will retire as a professor at 55. Look at me now, I'm not going to disclose. Well, it's easy to find, but I sure am not 55, and I'm still working, and I'm happy to be productive. So we have to get these taboos in Europe around topics that are actually impediments to building the fiscal space you're talking about.
And you mentioned the taboos in Europe. One of them obviously has to do with debt. There's a big debate. There's good debt. There's bad debt. I worry, or I wonder if you worry about the trajectory that we see of debt to GDP in Europe, or do you go joint debt in some areas can actually be good?
So two things. One, the trajectory in different countries is different. We're here in Bulgaria, debt to GDP is 24%. But even here, we are concerned that there may be a bit too much appetite to borrow. So countries where debt is very high, they really have to have medium-term strategy to bring it down, because otherwise it is suffocating the ability to invest in education, in artificial intelligence, in productive directions. Two, I very strongly believe that Europe should use its capacity to borrow together and deploy the resources
You're in favor
together.
of joint debt for critical areas.
If you want to invest in the most effective manner, you have to pool resources and deploy resources in that manner. I know this is such a hard topic, but
you say, Mario Draghi says it, many have said it. Why is it not moving? You're a commissioner, you know the machine. What's the issue?
Well, the issue is that, of course, we have 27 countries, different priorities, different decision-making processes, and it is a richness to have that diversity, but our decision-making process is not quite fit for the speed of change of today's world.
And what does your political instinct say? Is this going to happen ultimately? It happened in the pandemic.
I believe that we will wrestle and then we will come on the right side of history, as we have done many times. I'm a big believer in Europe. I think the European project is an excitement, and I think we have to bring that excitement back. And then be honest with European people. You want to live well? Guess what? We have to work together, we have to deploy our resources more effectively together, and we have to be more productive. There is just no way around it. We cannot continue to spend money we don't have.
And I have a final question. Of course, I have to ask this question because today we are recording this in Bulgaria. Obviously, you felt very strong, and this is something that you dedicated a lot of amount of personal energy, but also time to getting this country into the euro. It's happened now this year. But I have to be honest, I've detected a form of anxiety, even from the airport to the studio, about the euro, about prices, about inflation, about what is this going to do to our country? Is it really going to make it better? What do you say to this? Because you can really feel this just sense of anxiety about the changes in the pricing.
What I can say to my beloved fellow Bulgarians is we have been in the Eurozone now for many years because Bulgaria has a currency board. We have submitted our sovereignty on monetary policy first to the Bundesbank and then to the European Central Bank. We were in, but with no right to vote. Now we are in, and we have the right to vote and to benefit from the cushion that the Eurozone provides to us. But the euro is a prerequisite for a more dynamic economy, not a guarantee for increased standard of living. We have to continue on the path to reforms, to be strong economically on the basis of good fiscal policy, good debt management policy, and above all, focus on productivity of our people.
Well, Madam Georgieva, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us on the Europe Conversation here on Euronews. Always good to see you.
Thank you.